Arthur Jermyn. Part 2. Arthur Jermyn was the son of Sir Alfred Jermyn and a music hall singer of unknown origin. When the husband and father deserted his family, the mother took the child to Jermyn House, where there was none left to object to her presence. She was not without a notion of what a nobleman's dignity should be, and saw to it that her son received the best education which limited money could provide. The family resources were now sadly slender, and Jermyn House had fallen into woeful disrepair. But Uncle Arthur loved the old edifice and all its contents. He was not like other Jermyn who had ever lived, for he was a poet and a dreamer. Some of the neighboring families who had heard tales of old Sir Wade, Jermyn's unseen Portuguese wife, declared that her Latin blood must be showing itself, but most persons merely sneered at his sensitiveness to beauty, attributing it to his music-hall mother, who was socially unrecognized. The poetic delicacy of Arthur Jermyn was the more remarkable because his uncouth personal appearance. Most of the Jermyns had possessed a subtly odd and repellent cast, but Arthur's case was very striking. It is hard to say just what he resembled, but his expression, his facial angle, and his length of arms gave a thrill of repulsion to those who met him for the first time. It was the mind and character of Arthur Jermyn which atoned for his aspect. Gifted and learned, he took highest honors at Oxford, and seemed likely to redeem the intellectual fame of his family. Though of poetic rather than scientific temperament, he planned to continue the work of his forefathers in African ethnology and antiquities, utilizing the truly wonderful, though strange collections of Sir Wade. With his fanciful mind, he often thought of the prehistoric civilization in which the mad explorer had so implicitly believed, and would weave tale after tale about the silent jungle city mentioned in the latter's wilder notes and paragraphs, for the nebulous utterances concerning a nameless and unsuspected race of jungle hybrids. He had a peculiar feeling of mingled terror and attraction, speculating on the possible basis of such a fancy, and seeking to obtain light among more recent data gleaned by his great-grandfather and Samuel Seton among the Ongas. In 1911, after the death of his mother, Sir Arthur Jermyn determined to pursue his investigations to the utmost extent, selling a portion of his estate to obtain the requisite money. He outfitted an expedition and sailed for the Congo. Arranging with the Belgian authorities for a party of guides, he spent a year in the Onga and Calgary County, finding data beyond the highest of his expectations. Among the Calories was an aged chief called Wanu, who possessed not only a highly retentive memory, but a singular degree of intelligence and interest in old legends. This ancient confirmed every tale which Jermyn had heard, adding his own account of the stone city and the white apes as it had been told to him. According to Mwanu, the gray city and the hybrid creatures were no more, having been annihilated by warlike Nabangas many years ago. This tribe, after destroying most of the edifices and killing the live beings, had carried off the stuffed goddess statue, which had been the object of their quest. The white ape goddess, or they called it that, was, which the strange beings worshipped, and which was held by Congo tradition to be the form of one who had reigned as a princess among these beings. Just what the white ape-like creatures could have been, Mwanu had no idea, but he thought that they were the builders of the ruined city. Jermyn could form no conjecture, but by close questioning obtained a very picturesque legend of the stuffed female entity. Now, a lot of cultures talk about these white invaders before Europeans were supposed to have gotten there, in the 1700s or the 1800s or 1600s even, and even spoke of them as devils and stuff like this. So, like if the Vikings came down raiding and some of them made it to Africa, you can kind of understand what was going on here. The Ape Princess, it was said, became the consort of a white entity, the white male entity, who had come out of the West. For a long time they had reigned over the city together, but when they had a son, all three went away. Later, the male entity and the princess had returned, and upon the death of the princess, her so-called divine husband had mummified the body and enshrined it in a vast house of stone, where it was worshipped. Then he departed alone. The legend here seemed to present three variants. According to one story, nothing further happened, save that the stuffed female entity became a symbol of supremacy for whatever tribe might possess it. It was for this reason that the Nbangas carried it off. A second story told of an entity's return and death at the feet of his enshrined wife. A third told of the return of the son, grown to manhood, or apehood, or what they would consider godhood. As the case might be, yet unconscious of his identity, surely the imaginative blacks had made the most of whatever events might lie behind the extravagant legendary. Well, any race of people is going to extend things. Of the reality of the jungle city described by old Sir Wade, Arthur Jermyn had no further doubt, and was hardly astonished when early in 1912 he came upon what was left of it. Its size must have been exaggerated, yet the stones lying about proved that it was no mere Negro village. Well, no, it actually doesn't. Negro megaliths predate anything in Europe. Unfortunately, no carvings could be found, and the small size of the expedition prevented operations toward clearing one of the visible passageways that seemed to lead down into the system of vaults which Sir Wade had mentioned. The white apes and the stuffed female entity were discussed with all the native chiefs of the region, but it remained for a European to improve on the data offered by old Bwanu M. Verharen, Belgian agent at a trading post on the Congo, believed that he could not only locate but obtain the stuffed female entity, of which he had vaguely heard, since the once mighty Nbangas were now the submissive servants of King Albert's government, and with but little persuasion could be induced to part with the gruesome entity they had carried off. When Jermyn sailed for England, therefore, it was with the exultant probability that he would, within a few months, receive a priceless ethnological relic, confirming the wildest of his great-great-great-grandfather's narratives, that is, the wildest which he had ever heard. Countrymen near Jermyn House had probably heard wilder tales handed down from the ancestors who had listened to Sir Wade around the tables of the Knight's Head. Arthur Jermyn waited very patiently for the expectant box from M. Verharen, meanwhile studying with increasing diligence the manuscripts left by his mad ancestor. He began to feel closely akin to Sir Wade, and to seek relics of the latter's personal life in England as well as of his African exploits. Oral accounts of the mysterious and secluded wife have been numerous, but no tangible relic of her stay at Jermyn House remained. Jermyn wondered what circumstance had prompted or permitted such an effacement, and decided that the husband's insanity was the prime cause, and his great-grandmother, he recalled, was said to have been the daughter of a Portuguese trader in Africa. No doubt her practical heritage and superficial knowledge of the Dark Continent had caused her to flout Sir Wade's tales of the interior, a thing of which a man would not likely would not be likely to forgive. She had died in Africa, perhaps dragged thither by a husband determined to prove what he had told. But as Jermyn indulged in these reflections, he could not but smile at their futility a century and a half after the death of both his strange progenitors. In June of 1913, a letter arrived from M. Verhoeven telling of the findings of the stuffed female entity. It was, the Belgian averred, a most extraordinary object, an object quite beyond the power of a layman to classify. Whether it was human or simian only, a scientist could only determine, and the process of determination would be greatly hampered by its imperfect condition. Time and the Congo climate are not kind to mummies, especially when their preparation is as amateurish as it seemed to be the case here. Around the creature's neck had been found a golden chain bearing an NP locket on which were armorial designs, no doubt some hapless traveler's keepsake, taken by the Bungus and hung up upon the female entity as a charm. It came commenting on the contour of the mummy's face. M. Verhoeven suggested a whimsical comparison, or rather expressed a humorous wonder how it would strike his correspondent, but he was too much interested scientifically to waste many words in levity. Well, interpreting this stuff is really where a lot of the real science is. The stuffed female entity, he wrote, would arrive duly packed in about a month after the receipt of the letter. The boxed object was delivered at Jermyn House on the afternoon of August 3rd, 1913, being conveyed immediately to a large chamber in which housed the collection of African specimens as arranged by Dr. Robert and Arthur. What ensued can best be gathered from the tales of servants and from things and papers later examined. Of various tales of the age so amiss, the family butler is most ample and coherent. According to the trustworthy man, Sir Arthur Jermyn dismissed everything from the room before opening the box, though the instant sound of hammer and chisel showed that he did not delay the operation. Nothing was heard for some time. Just how long, Soames could not exactly estimate, but it was certainly less than a quarter of an hour later when that horrible scream, undoubtedly in Jermyn's voice, was heard. Immediately afterwards, Jermyn emerged from the room, rushing frantically toward the door, towards the front of the house, as if pursued by some hideous enemy. Expression on his face, a face ghastly enough in repose, was beyond description, and when near the front door he seemed to think of something and turned back in his flight, finally disappearing down the stairs to the cellar. The servants were utterly dumbfounded and watched at the head of the stairs, but their master did not return. A smell of oil was all that came up from the regions below. After dark, a rattling was heard at the door leading from the cellar into the courtyard, and a stable boy saw Arthur Jermyn glistening from head to foot with oil redolent of that fluid, steal furtively out and vanish on the black moor surrounding the house. Then, in an exaltation of supreme horror, everybody saw the end. A spark appeared on the moor. A flame arose, and a pillar of human fire reached to the heavens. The house of Jermyn no longer existed. The reason why Arthur Jermyn's charred fragments were not collected and buried lies in what was found afterwards. Principally, the thing in the box, the stuffed female entity, was a noxious sight, withered and eaten away, but was clearly a mummified white ape of some unknown species, less hairy than any recorded variety, and definitely nearer mankind, quite shockingly so. Detailed descriptions would have been rather unpleasant, but two salient particulars must be told, for they fitted in revoltingly with certain notes of Dr. Wade Jermyn's African expeditions. The Congolese legend